all this matrix energetics and distance healing work, all this healing at a distance work, how it works. So welcome. So, I used to talk about the physics a lot because I love that kind of stuff. And I kind of like to know some ideas of the science of what possibly is, how this is working. And what it does for me is it gives me a lot of reality in it. So I can go, oh yeah, I believe it. It's the same reason I like a lot of the spiritual texts, the Bible and some of the other teachings of other spiritual people from around the world from way back in the day, Babaji and Yogananda and Buddha and all those truths and things that they talk about. And the other thing that I like is that to hear success stories, like what's happened. Oh, this person had a miracle healing. This person had a miracle healing. This person, in Jesus's case, Lazarus rose from the dead. All these different healings, and we have our own. And you can look through my testimonial page and see what I've seen. And what it does for me is it gives me a reality. Like I get like, oh, wow, this is true. This could really happen. This is something that works and I can use it. And so it drives a lot of action for me and helps me do my deep inner work, do my own healing work, work with clients, get me through the tough times, help clients get through the tough times. And the physics is part of it. Now, if you just try to convince a regular human with a lot of physics to do energy work and healing work, it's probably not going to work because I didn't get there like that. When I first started with this kind of work, I had 8 months or so of not being able to run. And I had tried a lot of stuff. I was already a physical therapist, already doing a lot of really good work, had a few therapists working for me, and they all worked on me. I went to classes and got worked on. I got a few different pairs of orthotics. I kept trying to run and I couldn't run more than 5 minutes because of a spasm in my leg. And it was so frustrating, beyond frustrating, because at the time I was still dealing with a lot of anxiety and my sweaty hand thing going on. And my running 70, 80, 90, 100 miles a week or more for many years since I was a little kid helped keep my anxiety a little bit better, less issues with it. And plus I love to run. But here I was unable to run. It was my identity. And I went to a therapist, Julie Shishino in Los Angeles, highly recommend her, on Sepulveda. And she put one hand on my foot and said, oh, you have an artery problem. And I was like, okay. And so she worked on me for 2 hours, worked on my heart, worked on with techniques that I know now, and real simple techniques in the world of integrative manual therapy, and shifted it. And I felt way more relaxed. And I thought, wow, that was good. And so that was a Thursday, because I remember by Saturday, I was in Sacramento taking one of those integrative manual therapy classes. I think it was a cranial class, level 1, out of about 20 that I ended up taking of just the cranial class, 20 cranial classes. Can you imagine? And I took my running stuff because I thought, I think I'm going to be able to run. And I went for a run along the American River and I ran 30 minutes, totally good. And it never came back. And so it took me down this road. I went from this human to, wow, this was cool. This really shifted something. And so then I started taking lots of classes in integrative manual therapy and learning how it works and why it works and how to use it and all this stuff. And I got a lot of techno babble, like all the stuff of why it works and how it works. But that didn't help people really get that it worked. They had to see it in their own body, and it helped to hear and see some of these other stories. The story of Ali D from integrative manual therapy is incredible because we kept hearing these stories of this Ali D, and that was her name and still is her name. And she had come to an integrative manual therapy place in San Francisco, and Sharon had seen her, and this little girl, she was in her late teens, I believe, and she was paralyzed, both arms and legs, unexplained, mysterious condition, illness, and in a wheelchair, getting dizzy in a reclining wheelchair because she kept passing out. Had seen tons and tons of doctors. People were even saying it was in her head, and they couldn't figure it out. Well, Sharon figured it out, and they got lots and lots of treatment, a lot of therapists working on her, her family working on her, and she recovered. And so we kept hearing this story about Ali D, and this whole thing became a protocol for how to find this sort of thing. And when you find it, here's how to help shift it. And I was months later taking a class in Boulder, Colorado. It was called Double Crush, so for impingements along the nerves in the arms and legs. And the instructor was talking about the LED protocol and all about it and how got to be done, and what you do with it, and here's the LED protocol. And I'd seen it before, and I'd been using it for clients. And then this woman who was at the front taking notes stood up, one of my classmates, and she stood up and she said, "And I'm LED," and she did a cartwheel. And after that, I got to know her better and better. She was in San Francisco, became a therapist, had a family, and does great work in San Francisco, totally well. And so as I saw more and more of this crazy miracle stuff, I was like, holy cow, that's what led me to take 110 classes, It kind of drives a lot of action when you see something like that. And I've seen my own miracles in my own clinic in San Diego. And then when I was working in a bit in San Francisco and Los Angeles, a little bit in Connecticut, because I wanted to learn from Sharon G. Mateo. And then I ran into the Richard Bartlett matrix energetic stuff, and I could see how fast things could change. So I've seen a lot of stuff. Now, the physics of this, who knows, right? Who knows what's really true? But what I've noticed is there's a lot of assumptions in medicine, and there's a lot of assumptions in physics and science, and a lot of assumptions that people make, and we're just human. And so we make these assumptions, and then we take it as fact, and then we run our whole lives on these facts, and that are not true. And one of the beautiful things about matrix energetics was Richard Bartlett showed us how we really can make up our own roles, and we can have a different life, and we really can play in this matrix. And the world is way more malleable, and maybe it is mostly spirit. Maybe it's all spirit. Maybe it's all love. And so I started to get a reality that stuff could change really fast. And so the physics of it, who knows if it's true, right? But the work of Nassim Haramein was the one version of stuff that I heard that seemed to make some sense. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and hope that it helps you transform from this human that thinks this is possible but nothing else is possible, to a human that's like, holy cow, maybe that's possible too. And let's do this now. So Nassim kept getting kicked out of school. And if you Google Nassim Haramein, you'll get some really cool videos, all sorts of stuff that makes you laugh, long videos of all these conferences he's done and talked about stuff. And he kept getting kicked out of school as a kid because he kept asking questions that just irritated the instructors. I think he was from Italy. And his mom was getting more and more irritated, and he kept getting farther and farther away from his home because he had to go to school somewhere, and they kept kicking him out. So he was on buses a lot. And he just had all these thoughts, and he had these dreams, and he was like, what is the world really made of? What's going on? And he had some epiphanies. And then he started studying physics. And the story goes that he was in a van, and I believe he was living in British Columbia as a ski instructor, but he was living in a van studying physics books. And long story, short story, he got published in peer-reviewed physics journals. He started hanging out with a lot of physicists, and found one that was already retired, so he couldn't ruin her career, with the craziness. But she did a lot of the math for him, and they got published in peer-reviewed journals. And there's a paper called the Schwarzschild proton. So you might want to look that up. And what he did was, in physics, in quantum physics, when they were starting out in quantum physics, I believe in the 50s or so, Einstein era and all that stuff, they had a problem with their math. Because when they did the math around what's in the invisible universe, in the small universe, in the subatomic universe, when they did the math to find out how much energy is in a cubic centimeter of space, just a little space, how much energy is in space, that's pretty cool, huh? They had a number, and it was infinity. And it just confounded them and irritated them, and they just couldn't, it made all their other math not make any sense at all. It just disrupted everything. So what they did was they said, you know what, let's take how many, a photon is what they thought was the smallest thing the universe does. And it's just a little dot of light. And so they said, let's take that. It's called Planck's constant, after Max Planck. And the length that a photon is, it's teeny, teeny, teeny. And they said, that's the smallest thing the universe does. How many of those fit into a cubic centimeter of space? And so, of course, it was a giant number, but it wasn't infinity. And they took infinity out. They actually called it in the textbooks nasty infinity because it messed everything up. So instead, they put this really big number into the equations, and now their math made sense. But then other stuff didn't make sense, like gravity, and something didn't make sense. And this was really confounding Nassim, because when you think of an atom, of course, there's the neutrons, the neutral particles, there's the protons, the positive particles, and there's negative particles, electrons spinning around, right? Well, protons, if you think of them, they're positively charged, they're like little magnets, right? And so they shouldn't stick together. If anything, they should go flying apart, because if you put two little positive charged magnets together, they're going to fly apart, right? So, but they don't. And so, so Nassim was like, what the heck is going on? And the scientists didn't know what was going on. So here's what they did. They made up a really, 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 really big number of how much energy, how much force is required to keep two protons that are positively charged next to each other, because it would take a lot of energy. And they called it something. I believe that's how they started coming up with things like dark matter and dark energy, and saying the universe is made up of 96% of this dark matter, dark energy. We don't know what it is, but it's there. And there's this strong nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force is just a made up number that has to be there to keep these two protons together, they thought. So a lot of assumptions. They took infinity out, and they made up big numbers, and they made up a big number about what kind of force is used to keep these two protons together. And Nassim was like, that doesn't make sense. So he started doing a lot of math, and he started reading a lot and figuring stuff out. And what he found in the Schwarzschild proton paper, what he published, was that there's infinite mass, infinite energy, infinite information in every single proton. But the problem is there's a lot of protons. There's a lot of protons in me. There's a lot of protons in you. There's a lot of protons in those cabinets and things behind us. There's protons everywhere. And so, but there's infinite energy, information, and mass in each proton. So that gets a little weird. And so he started to do the math around it, and it was like, yeah, these are like what are called black holes, a huge amount of mass. And so black holes attract a lot of stuff to them because there's so much gravity, because they're so dense. Well, the protons have infinity in mass. So he was theorizing that these two positively charged protons are actually close to each other because of gravity. But when they looked closer and closer, they found that the protons were spinning at the speed of light. So even the protons, which are basically the physical part of us, are light. Even the physical stuff is just light and information and mass and infinity spinning around at the speed of light. So when we think of, and we're still talking about you, right? Like your physical body. So this is kind of the stuff that I feel we're playing with when we play with matrix energetics. So if we can go from here, this proton, this little spot, this has infinity, and this one, and get out of the way, out of all the infinities, the infinite infinities, right? Could there be another reality that would be more useful for you right now? It's kind of cool to play like that. If Yogananda can do this, and Babaji can do this, what about that? If there was a dude named Jesus and a guy named Buddha, what about this? If you have certain rules that you've been living by with a lot of assumptions, might there be another set of rules? And let's go option now. All right, you guys. So enjoy. Let me know what you think. And let's get out there and live. Let's really live.